For some time, we've been treated to an outpouring of what can only be described as anti-Easter literature, specifically a cult favorite tactic used by the cults. But even the pagan world and Christians are telling us how the holiday, in this case Easter, is pagan in origin and bad, and should not be celebrated by Christians. These opinions are backed up with some very rather unusual and curious fantasies masquerading as historical facts. The following videos are intended only to re-examine popular historical claims of the origins of Easter, to provide further discussions concerning some of the so-called facts offered in some anti-Easter publications.
John Wycliffe, who produced the first English Bible in 1382, had translated from the Latin, and left the word Pascha basically untranslated, and called it Pasch or Paschke. Luther occasionally did likewise, using the transliterated form Pas. For example, in Leviticus 23:5, he rendered the Lord's Passover as De Herren Pas, and in Acts 12:27, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord was. Es ist das Passopfer der Herren. But when Tyndale prepared the New Testament, he followed Luther's more common practice, and used the most common word in his native language. That is, while Luther most often used Oster and its cognates, Tyndale used Esther and its cognates. For example, and his father and mother went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Esther. And he said unto them, I have inwardly desired to eat this Esther lamb with you before that I suffer. And the Jews' Esther was even at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And Esther, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. The Jews' Esther was nigh at hand. It was the Sabbath even which falleth in the Esther feast, and about the 6th hour. For Christ our Esther lamb is offered up for us. Note, if the Hislop pagan derivation theory were correct, it would imply that the Tyndale and Luther, before whom were really calling Jesus the Astarte lamb or Ishtar lamb. But when Tyndale translated the Old Testament, he thought that it was anachronistic to use the word Easter for the Jewish feast. This is because the derivation of Easter comes from the resurrection, which had yet to happen. So Tyndale went back to the root of Psach, that is Pasach, meaning to pass over, and coined the new term Passover. So it is due to Tyndale, not to paganism, that some English Bibles have two different words, Easter and Passover, to translate a single Hebrew-Greek term. As the King James Version was essentially the fifth revision of the Tyndale Bible, and retains about 90% of its wording, it keeps this feature. But it more consistently applied Tyndale's logic, to retain Easter only for Acts 12:4, where the Christian resurrection celebration was in view. Not just the Jewish feast. For all other occurrences, the King James Version translators used Tyndale's new word Passover. But this obscured the traditional meaning of Easter, that included the Jewish Passover. Modern translations generally use only one word, Passover, to translate Psach Pascha. While the above firmly refutes the pagan derivation nonsense about Easter, there are far more familiar things, that really are derived from paganism, but about which few people worry. It is logical to avoid a Christian-based holiday that brings people together in worship, because of some perceived tie to paganism, while using everyday products and ignoring their obvious pagan heritage. You might have your muffler replaced by Midas, wear shoes designed by Nike, chew Trident gum, or watch a movie by Orion Pictures. Several days of our week are named after Norse gods, except for Saturday, that comes from the Roman god Saturn, and Sunday and Monday of course. The 8 planets and many of their moons are named after Roman deities. Mazda cars are named for a Zoroastrian deity, and many people drive a Saturn, Mercury, Aries, Aurora etc. But even in God's word, some of the heroes in the Bible had paganized names. E.g. Mordecai, the real hero of the Book of Esther, has a name related to the Babylonian high god Marduk. Consider also Daniel's 3 friends, who were prepared to be thrown in the furnace rather than worship any but the true God. They were originally named Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah, but are better known by the names the Babylonians gave them, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. Daniel 1:7. Abednego means servant of Nebo, the pagan god.